Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Tuesday, September the 18th, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And we hope your week continues to go swimmingly well. We're going to try to contribute to make it go even better, as we do every single day, by giving you your daily dose of happy. And we start that off every day the same way we always do, which is by talking about what's going well. And I know what the answer is before I even ask. Wendy's telling me everything always works out for her, so I know everything's going well, right?
Well, I guess we're done with the show. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today, because Walt has completed.
We'll see you all next time.
Everything we're going to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. That is what it all boils down to. It kind of makes you wonder why we keep doing podcasts all the time.
And I won't say you're stealing my thunder, because we can never say everything's working out for me enough.
This is true. This is very true.
Yeah.
In fact, I was noticing this week in particular, there are lots of times when I need to remind myself of that, because it's so easy to forget. You know, we deal with the contrast. We deal with stuff. We deal with things that go on that don't always make us feel happy. And, you know, part of that is reminding ourselves, everything always works out for me in the end. Everything's always working out for me.
And not even at the end. It's even working out while you think it's not working out. It's working out.
Say that one 3 times fast.
Exactly. So when you think things are not going well for you, that's actually the beginning, the precursor to how everything always works out for you.
It's interesting how that works, isn't it? Because, I mean, we can be in the midst of what seems to be, stress and struggle time, and yet that's when things are working out. That's a hard one to reconcile, you know, in our feeble human minds. That can't quite make head or tail out of that.
Well, I had something happen yesterday where I was like, oh, I am not liking the results of this. This is not good. And in the moment of that awareness, I went, well, this is giving birth to new things. This is giving birth to the resolution, the answer that I'm seeking. So I immediately leaned into, okay, the answer's on its way.
And what happened? So, I mean, did that turn things around? Did that make you feel better? Did it produce a good result? What happened?
Just by focusing on the answers on its way, that feels a whole lot better than I don't like where I am right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I reminded myself of how every time I had an experience that didn't feel good, when I pivoted my attention to reminding myself that everything's always working out for me, or the answer's on its way, or just give it time and I'm going to see something I like, I immediately start to feel better. So the sense of discouragement and or, oh, I don't know what to do, that definitely leaves, because now I know that there's a resolution that's heading my way. So it changes how I feel almost instantaneously.
And, you know, my typical thing with you is usually to ask you, like, okay, well, what about for somebody who hasn't gotten as advanced as you are? But I'm even going to answer that question before I answer it, before I ask it, rather, out of something that Cindy mentioned to me, which is essentially that, you know, when we're in the middle of this stuff, and we're trying to get to the point where we're feeling like Wendy feels, where everything's always working out for me, and we're not quite there. How do we get there? You just keep trying. You just keep doing it over and over again. You just keep going. You keep trying. You keep persisting.
I mean, the first time I heard Abraham say, everything's always working out for you, I went, oh, yeah, really? I don't believe it. But I kept hearing him say it over and over, and I went, well, what if they're right and I'm wrong? What if I'm holding on to my rebellious, I'm not going to believe it until I see it, being? And what if they're right and I'm missing out on happiness because I'm just being stubborn? And that question gave rise to a response from within me, not my inner being, but me, saying, well, Wendy, just give it a try. What do you have to lose? If life doesn't feel good right now, and what if I could start to feel better right now?
Yeah.
But I'm just being stubborn, and that's what's keeping me from feeling better right now. And so that talk kind of did something for me. And so the next time I heard Abraham saying, well, everything's always working out for you, instead of going, yeah, right, I went, and maybe it is. Maybe it is. And then I heard it again. I'm like, well, I did see some, I had a circumstance that I was able to refer to, and I went, well, that started out pretty ugly, but that turned out really good. Maybe there's something to this. And so it had been, a matter of time before I went, well, I truly believe they're right. I have evidence now to say everything does always work out for me. And I just started practicing it more often and saying it and thinking it and feeling it closer to the time of the experience I wasn't having a good time with, instead of waiting until a day or two or three later when I reminded myself, oh, somehow this can turn around if I just focus on it turning around.
Yeah, that's really that's the word right there, practice, the one that you used.
Yeah.
Practice is it. Because practice is where we still don't know how to play the piano, but we're practicing it. And we're making a lot of mistakes, and we keep trying to iron out the mistakes, and we keep trying to get a little bit better and a little bit better. That's practicing it. Well, that's what we're trying to do here.
You tend to highlight with me that I'm already there. And in a way, there's been a whole lot of practice. And I think with all the different co-hosts and everybody we, interact with, we get to see various stages of where people are at with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, part of me says, you know what, I'm willing to say I am an example of a more advanced stage. But I'm not going to feel guilty about that, or like,
no,
well, nobody's going. But part of me wants to go, well, people aren't going to be able to relate to me. You know what? If you don't relate to me, but you go, but I want what she has, kind of like from the movie When Harry Met Sally.
Yes, right.
I'll have what she's having.
Yes.
I want you to stretch for where I am. And if you're already beyond where I am, I want to stretch to where you are.
One of B. Arthur's finest moments in the movies was that one.
Yeah. So that's something that I learned from my friends Keisha and Rhonda, which is whenever you see somebody experiencing something that you wish you could experience, you just immediately acknowledge, whether out loud or in your mind, depending on what's appropriate, I'll have some of that.
Mm-hmm.
I want some of that. And get excited about it, because if you see somebody else having it, it's available to you too.
The getting excited part can sometimes be the part that trips people up, but it is the important one, because somehow we have to get
excited.
Well, you said you want to get excited about it. You want to feel good about saying, I want some of that too. I want to feel good about that. I want that.
Well, even if you're not excited, if you just go, I want that, and I really want that, that would be really nice. That at least is creating a step one experience where you're doing the asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if you're like pissed off or jealous, envious, like turning green because how come they get it and I don't? When you have that level of awareness that someone else has something you don't have, even if you don't feel great about it, that's okay. That was a step one moment. You've just asked. It's now gone into your vortex. Your inner being is like, okay, got it. I am now embodying the energetic vibration of that which you desire. And as soon as you're ready to let go of you being angry or ticked off or jealous and start focusing on what you want, it can come into your experience.
Well, there's an interesting thing you said there, though, because on the one hand, you said you could be pissed off and express the want. And the next moment you said, well, you can either be pissed off or you can be focusing on the want. And that's the thing. Early on, when you're focusing on the want, that in that particular case, we're focusing in a pissed off mode, which is not the mode we want to stay in.
Well, but that has to do with how you feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not negate the fact that even while you were in a angry, jealous fit of rage that someone else has something that you desire, your inner being immediately responds to that saying, okay, I know what you want. I know you don't really want this angry feeling, but who cares how you got to it? Now you've put that in your vortex. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, sure. I guess my point is we just don't want to stay in that angry feeling.
You know what? I'm willing to play devil's advocate today and say, stay in it as long as you feel like staying in it. Because if you stay in it for a long period of time, you keep adding more to your vortex of what you desire.
Okay.
It may not feel good. And eventually, if it doesn't feel good long enough, you might do something different. You might learn something about yourself.
So then how does resistance play into this? Well,
that is resistance. Feeling bad is the resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying you have to get out of resistance every time you're there, the moment you're there. We all have choice. You've heard me talk about, there are times I choose to stay in my resistant state because I use it as an opportunity to find out some more things about how that resistance came about, what that means to me. And sometimes that creates a lot of value.
Okay.
I'm not a believer that just because you feel bad, you got to figure out immediately how to turn it around so you can feel good.
That makes sense. Because it's not going to happen quickly necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, yes, of course, the ultimate goal in life, or maybe that's too big and lofty. Those of us who believe in the law of attraction, I think we understand that feeling good feels good.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to feel good more often than we don't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
However, and maybe this is an advanced thing, I don't know, I think there are times that feeling not good serves me if I use it for some purpose to gain understanding and awareness.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that I'm not a believer that just because you don't feel good in the moment, you've got to find a way immediately to pivot and go find the positive direction.
Well, that's fine. I'm just trying to reconcile to the point where people actually get to receive what it is that they've been asking for.
Well, yeah, obviously, if you want to get what you've been asking for, eventually you have to move toward the feeling more positive and focusing on the desired result. And I guess the piece I was introducing is sometimes to get to that desired result, you need more information.
Okay.
And that information is found in the negative feeling. Because every negative feeling is a message. Every negative feeling is a message.
That's one thing that I've been trying to become more and more cognizant of, more and more aware of, and get myself to a place where I am mimicking what you do. I ask the question of, okay, so what's this message you have for me, Mr. Feeling that I don't like very much?
Mm-hmm.
And
and sometimes you have to just feel into that feeling. What does this feel like? Sad, mad, glad, ticked off? Oh, just like when my father used to say blah, blah, blah to me. It'll be surprising when those things show up, but that was the message that sometimes you needed to hear. Oh, I'm recreating this thing that happened with my dad a gazillion years ago. That didn't feel good when that happened to me when I was 7 years old. So what was it that my 7-year-old needed to hear or know or experience that he didn't get at that time?
So
sometimes that's the information that you're seeking.
So kind of similar to that nice little rampage you did last Thursday. Because you did a thing where you basically reframed an experience you had with your mother.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And and I'll tell you, here's, I guess, the point that I'm trying to make here today. Had I taken the experience that I found that didn't land nicely with me and my mother when I was 16, 14, 15, 16 years old, without purposely doing it, I've been replaying the pain of that experience over and over and over and over. And so let's just say here as an adult, something pops up in my life, I've re-triggered that pain. If I were to immediately go, oh, I don't like to feel bad, let's pivot toward what I want. Honestly, I don't even know what I want because I didn't really understand what took place back then. All I know is I kept recreating the pain of it. So when I felt into the pain, I went, okay, what is this about? And boom, I got a memory of me sitting on the edge of my mother's bed. And then I relived the conversation I had with her and how bad that her response to me felt. That's when I said to me as a grown adult, what did that teenager need to hear that she didn't get then? And then all of a sudden it started coming, like I started getting awareness of what I wished the teenager part of me would have heard. Now I was recognizing the message. In other words, I couldn't get the message as the 50-some-year-old that I am. because I didn't understand it enough. I just kept getting re-triggered back into the teenage experience. When I allowed myself to feel me as the teenager, that's where the answers started to show up. That's where the awareness started to show up. That's where the message started to unfold to me. And that's where I was able to, I guess in a way, reparent the teenager, telling her what she needed to hear. And now, when I think back to me sitting on the edge of mom's bed and having her say some crazy things to me that did not help me feel any better, I don't have any pain in that anymore.
So you really
It's
think
what I
you really think then that doing that recreating, I forget what you called it. I called it reframing. You call it something else. But
That's okay.
that process, you actually found that released and eliminated that pain that had been hanging around all those times. It just seems a little surprising to me that you do that and you get that quick of a response out of it. I'm not against it. I'm just surprised.
First of all, that process that I did, that's a process I learned in NLP 20 some years ago. I have adapted it in numerous ways, and I've integrated it into different things that I do. But do I believe that process works? Absolutely. It does not work if I don't get into the feeling. But if I can recreate the feeling, which is easy because I had been recreating it over and over in my life. It was easy to feel it. When I could work with the feeling, I could make the changes. And as far as it's amazing that it happens that fast, well, now let's get out of my story and let's just talk about law of attraction.
Okay.
Our point of attraction allows law of attraction to respond to us, and it responds so fast when we are completely aligned to that which we desire. Or in this case, when I changed how I'd been feeling about this teenager experience, and now I felt loved and nurtured, and I felt like now I understand what was going on. I felt hope and inspiration for my future. That's how I felt right then and there, Walt, when I was doing this reframe. The law of attraction responded to me immediately and went, wow, Wendy feels inspired and encouraged for these things in her life. And then I did.
Okay. Well, that's pretty cool.
Law of attraction is an immediate responder based on what we give the law of attraction to work with.
I think I was just really thinking about what I know as not an expert in psychotherapy. I've picked things up from being married to a psychotherapist and from knowing a number of psychotherapists, but I can't by any stretch of the imagination say I'm an expert. And yet the little bit that I've been able to pick up suggests that very often when someone is doing therapy, and the therapy is kind of similar to what you're talking about there, may not be exactly the same, but kind of similar. And what ends up happening is they will often reach a hot spot. I'll call what you experienced with your mother a hot spot. They'll reach a hot spot and they'll kind of delve into it, and then it will take off in days, weeks, months to get past that hot spot. And it doesn't usually get that kind of quick response, whereas you're talking about getting a very, very quick response. So I certainly appreciate and understand the role that law of attraction can play in that. It just surprises me that the result is kind of so much better than what therapy reports.
Well, I have no negative things to say about therapy. I believe that what I did for myself was a therapeutic technique.
Oh, okay.
And I think a lot of it has to do with my maturity in not being of my chronological age, but my maturity in my knowledge of how to process previous painful childhood experiences. So I have so much belief in when I follow this step or these steps or this procedure, I'm going to get great results. And if I don't get the results I'm yet seeking, that means there's yet another feeling I have not yet uncovered.
So in other words, there can be like multiple events or multiple kinds of events all tied together, kind of weaving together a massive pain, so to speak.
Yes, and I will tell you, at this point in my life, I have done this kind of work so many times on what seems like the same situation, but it's a slight variation of it, that I used to get I still got a result, but it didn't knock the whole boulder down because it was a big boulder. I just chipped off a little piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say where I am now in my own personal maturity of cleaning out my personal baggage, I don't have boulders anymore. I have little stones and pebbles.
Oh, that's nice.
And so now when I do the work, I get a result that on some level may seem like it's a bigger change, but it's really not. It's a change based on the work that I did. I've just done a whole lot of work in the same topic area because I started out with boulders and then I started chipping them away until now. It's almost like I'm just flicking off the little pieces and parts that are still left.
So what seemed like a really huge result was actually kind of the tail end of a long series of steps and results that led to the point where finally you were able to get that big, big result.
You could say that. Although I would say every time I worked on another chip of it, it felt this big.
Meaning what?
Well, it's like how it felt in me was like a phenomenal release. This release was not any bigger or better than any of the other releases I've had in this same topic area, having to do with me being overweight and my body image and that kind of thing and wanting a boyfriend, etc. So when I expressed it to you, I was saying, wow, this feels awesome. It was a huge shift in how I feel.
Oh, yeah, that was clear.
Now, has it completed everything in that topic? Don't know yet. Don't know unless something else pops up. But I don't care in the fact that I'm not looking for more stuff to deal with. If it shows up in my experience, I'll deal with it. But I don't go looking for bad stuff. I don't go looking for trauma.
So is that like an idea to keep in mind, sort of like a key idea for someone who's trying to get through their own stuff that's getting in the way of what they're trying to manifest?
I'm not quite sure what to do with that. Can you ask that again?
Yeah, let me try it another way. The phrasing was starting to fall apart as I was saying it. Normally it doesn't do that, but sometimes it does. Let's try it this way. For someone who is trying to learn how to deal with these I don't even know what to call them. This is where wording fails me. These pain points, these things that come up that are unpleasant, and we want to get away from them, and we want to attract something else, and they just keep coming up, so we have to deal with them. And that's what you've been describing here. You've been describing the process of how to deal with them. And I guess the question I'm asking is one of the key ideas for dealing with them the idea of just deal with them one at a time. Don't try to go after all of them at once. Because it can be very, very easy for any of us to feel overwhelmed right from the very beginning, simply because we sense this is going to be a major thing. This is something that we're just like touching the tip of the iceberg on it, and oh my God, this is going to be so overwhelming.
Well, and so you use the example of somebody going into therapy or a psychotherapist or somebody of that kind.
Yeah.
Let's say they go with some big something, like my husband and I are fighting all the time, and I don't know if it's time to end the relationship or stay with it. And then as the therapist and the client begin to work together, oftentimes they're going to recognize, well, this is a pattern not only in the current marriage relationship, but in every boyfriend-girlfriend relationship of the past, and it even maybe falls over into some of the friendship relationships. So now, the therapist and the client will start digging deeper. And, they don't have to go find the core issue, but that's typically where they head. And so if they lob off a piece of it, like the client gets some new awareness and understanding of like, oh, this is a pattern I've been creating. I didn't even realize it. They may get some relief just realizing, oh, this is a pattern. This isn't just a one-off. It's not that my husband is just a horrible person. There's something in me that keeps creating this. To me, when I have those kinds of experiences, I get really excited because I know something now I didn't know before. And so that to me is like chipping off one little piece. And now I come back to the following session and I say, okay, now let's take this a little bit deeper. And now maybe where we go is having a greater understanding of how I am personally responsible for creating my reality. Didn't know that before. I just blamed everybody in my life when I didn't like what was going on. I blamed my mother, my father, my husband, my children. So this is all me. Well, that's kind of interesting. Well, that actually feels good because if I know it's me, I can I'll learn to control my responses to what's going on. But when I blamed everybody, I felt completely out of control because I can't change who they are.
Well, I like your response better than the one I often give myself, because the response I often give myself is, "Oh, darn, I can't get away with anything. It's me again."
Well, you could go there if you want to. But I think if you have a good therapist, they're going to help reframe it so you recognize as the client, wow, this new piece of information actually puts me in greater control instead of how I had been feeling, which was out of control when I blamed everybody else.
That is a better way to look at it.
So in this scenario, I went to the therapist because I want to work on my relationship with my husband, but we haven't even touched that yet. We're still working on me recognizing how this stuff came about. And wow, I'm actually the author of all this crap that's happening in my life. So we haven't touched the relationship with my husband, but we're chunking off little pieces and actually laying a foundation for when it is time to work on the specific issues with the husband, which, by the way, will still always relate back to the self and not the husband. But what I'm saying is I've been doing this work for about 30 years. I mean, really consistent doing the work. Now, I didn't always have great tools in the beginning, and I didn't even know how to use them very effectively. And I was actually better at using them on other people than myself because it was way harder to be both the therapist and the client.
Well, yeah, isn't that always the case? I mean, I think that's true for everybody. It's always easier to help somebody else than it is to help yourself.
Yeah. But I've gotten much better at being able to do the work for myself. I don't always have to call somebody else to help walk me through it. And so when I say I'm more mature in my process, I mean that. I've practiced my process, not just law of attraction process, but I've also been practicing the personal transformation exercises that I've learned of how to get to the bottom of something. And so I put all that together, and that's how I work. That's how I work when I coach someone else. It's how I work when I have my own stuff coming to the surface. But back to your comment, it's all about practice. I didn't just learn this yesterday.
Right.
I didn't just go take a coaching course, that I signed up for to get a certification so I could hang out my shingle, but haven't practiced. I've just gotten some information. I'm way beyond I've just gotten some information.
Yeah, right.
I'm a seasoned coach. I'm a seasoned personal transformation expert. Not only helping others, but I use it on myself first, always. I never do something for someone else that I haven't already pretty much perfected on myself.
Yeah. Well, now you've talked about a few things here. I mean, we were talking earlier about therapy. That's certainly one big piece that people use to improve, to get into better places, to deal with contrasty stuff that gets in the way. Second is you talked about how you were working on yourself, and that's something that certainly anyone can do. And the third thing you mentioned is sometimes you'll call a friend, which in coaching circles is really helpful because your friends are coaches. So you get to call another coach, which is really nice. But even if you're just talking about a regular friend, this all kind of raises a question. When one is looking at one's own situation and trying to decide, well, do I need a therapist? Can I do it myself? Should I call a friend? How do you decide? How do you decide which way to go on that?
One, it has a lot to do with how hungry are you to get to the bottom of this. If you're really hungry and you don't want to wait, then I'd say hiring a therapist or a coach is going to get you there a whole lot faster.
Okay.
If you do it by yourself and you're not exactly sure how to do it, you're playing a lot of hit or miss, trial and error methodology to try to get there.
Plenty of room for frustration, no doubt.
Well, and it's like my niche market, if you will, is people who believe in the law of attraction but struggle to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was interesting. I was talking to a client the other day, and she, listens to Abraham, and she'll say, you know what? I wanted to share with somebody I know, like, hey, go listen to some Abraham Hicks YouTube. But she said, my experience with it when I first started listening was Abraham has a completely different vocabulary than like mainstream humanity. And plus, because you just kind of jump in wherever you get, whatever YouTube clip you happen to get, you don't always get it in context.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, here's step 1 of understanding law of attraction. Here's step 2. And even if you watch The Secret or read the book, it's still not a step 1, 2, 3 process. It's almost like you have joined in the midst. It's like watching a 2-hour movie and you didn't start the movie until an hour and 15 minutes into it.
So you've mentioned that before. What exactly are you talking about there? Be more specific. Why do you say that The Secret doesn't give the right 1, 2, 3 setup?
Well, The Secret is not at least in my mind, it's not a step-by-step instructional course.
True.
It's more of a motivational / inspirational movie to enlighten individuals who are ready to hear about this, to say this really cool thing called law of attraction is available to us all.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But because they have clips of all the different gurus and experts that speak in the personal development space, they kind of start with a topic and then have a bunch of gurus talk on it. Then they kind of move to another element or another part of law of attraction topic. But it's not like any one of them saying, okay, if you want to understand law of attraction, here it is from start to finish. Mm-hmm. And here's how you can utilize it and apply it to your life. It's more like little tidbits. And I mean, in a way, everything you need to know is there. But I've yet to know anybody who has said to me, you know what, I watched The Secret, and boy, immediately I was able to take all those principles, apply them to my life, and my life has turned upside down. And I knew exactly what to do with everything I learned in The Secret.
Yeah.
I don't think The Secret was intended for that. I think it was more like a really powerful introduction to a really powerful law called law of attraction.
Which is kind of what we talked about when you and I went through the book, The Law of Attraction, The Basics of the Teachings of Abraham, which Esther and Jerry put out a few years back to address this exact thing. What is the true step-by-step learning process for understanding how the law of attraction works? I think we both agree that's really the primer on the subject.
I think it's a primer, but in my opinion, it's still not laid out the way we would like teach in school. Like kindergarten has to come before first grade, and first grade has to come before second grade, because there's curriculum in each one that builds upon one thing upon the next.
Well, then do you think there's a source for that, or is that something that is yet to be built?
I think it comes from within.
So say more.
Well, I believe every human being is at a different place in their journey. And when people go to an Abraham workshop, they ask the questions based on where they are in their journey, and Abraham responds. So if you're listening and you're not nearly as advanced as the person in the hot seat, the answer may not be something that you know how to apply right away. And then on the same token, the next person sitting in the hot seat could be a big time beginner who says, I just found out about you guys a month ago, and I've never done personal development in my whole life. I've never even read a self-help book. Well, the answer that, Abraham responds to that person may be very different. And so I believe the work of Abraham Hicks is a huge conglomeration of the askings of many people. But it's kind of like you've jumped into the middle of a series, and you just kind of take it however you can. And not everybody can grasp it just by listening to a few YouTubes.
So carrying that out
And
to another step, what you're really suggesting here is that because, and I agree with you, context really is everything. That's one of my favorite phrases. That if you don't know what the context of the conversation or the situation is, if you don't know what the background of it is, then any simple presentation of whatever the subject is, doesn't matter what the subject is, any simple presentation is going to miss some of the boat without that context. It just, you have to have context in order to make sense out of what's going on. And since everybody's context is different, what we're really trying to do when we're watching Abraham Hicks videos or even reading the books where they're drawing a lot of stuff from the workshops, or reading The Secret or anything else, we're trying to make sense of a topic from a whole range of different points of view of different people in different spaces of their life, and trying to draw parallels between them so that we can actually turn it into a coherent whole, something that actually holds together, holds water. When you phrase it that way, it's like it's amazing we understand any of it.
I mean, like, to me, physics is one of those topics. It's really esoteric. And if I just hear somebody quote something that comes out of physics, I may go, okay, I now have more questions than that little quote answered.
Mm-hmm.
Because the quote might say something really profound, but I'm like, but I don't understand the foundation behind that. But like when I was in school, when I learned physics, it was introduced to me, in kind of a foundational step-by-step sequence of understanding. And I don't see that either The Secret or Abraham Hicks provides information in that format, which is why I think it's so awesome that there's so many people on our planet that have come to understand law of attraction, and they've put out books, seminars, programs, coaching, all sorts of different things. So if you don't get it yet, there's all sorts of ways that you can get it.
Mm-hmm. True.
But to go back to one of your earlier questions, well, what does somebody do if, do they need therapy? Do they need to see a coach? It really depends on what the person's hunger level is and curiosity to know more, either to know more or to resolve more. For me personally, long before I knew law of attraction, I started out with self-help books. Then I went into traditional therapy. From there, I did what were called recovery groups. They were groups of people who had, a similar issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Tony Robbins. So now I went to like an individual who had a body of knowledge through their own. I mean, his stuff is from his own experience. He didn't go to high school or college or any of that stuff. He started doing what he does at 19 years old.
Which is crazy. Wow.
But he figured this stuff out. It made a difference in his life, and he started sharing it. Well, then I learned that one of the courses that he took was NLP, which is a neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically the understanding of how the mind and the brain integrate to help or to cause behavior to happen in our life. And so when I started attending Tony Robbins seminars, I went, wow, this is profound. I want more. I was very hungry. I wanted more. So I knew taking an NLP course was in my future. But they're not cheap. So it took a while until I had the money.
Yeah.
Plus I was also doing a more series of Tony Robbins stuff. So I kind of followed my Tony Robbins stuff until I felt like, okay, I've now gotten all that maybe not all, but I've gotten a lot from him. And now I'm ready for someone new to take me to the next level. Mm-hmm. And by then I was ready I could afford some NLP. Well, I couldn't afford them. I put my credit card.
We are not recommending that, by the way.
Oh, you know what? I do recommend it sometimes.
Oh, do you? Okay.
It was the right
I'm not
thing
recommending
for me.
it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say that I'm not going to recommend it. I'll let you, if you want to recommend it, that's okay. You can do that.
If you feel called to do something strong enough and credit is the only way you can do it and your inner being is aligned to that, then go for it. So that's how I started doing my NLP courses. And then there was something called Huna, which is the spiritual practices of the ancient Hawaiian people. And it was very similar. It was more of a spiritual component where NLP was more of a logistic brain kind of thing. And so I felt called to that. And so I guess my point is I was very hungry from a very early age to make changes in my life. And I've just described some of the ways that I felt led to learn how to get some of those changes. And I did make changes all along the way. And then law of attraction was kind of like the big, at the 4th of July celebration where you go to see fireworks and they shoot them off one at a time. And then at the end, they go, boom, 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 boom. And it's a huge display.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the grand finale,
that's
right.
That's what law of attraction felt like to me. It was like the grand finale of all the programs, products, services that I learned from and therapeutic techniques. Law of attraction was like the big bad. Wow. It took everything that I'd learned and put it together in a way that started to make sense and amplified what I knew to a point that I could now make sense out of things that I still hadn't found the answers to how things made sense. So to answer the question, what does a person do? Follow their intuition, follow their gut. If they can't afford to do something, well, then they don't do that. They go, well, what can I do for free? Well, Abraham Hicks is free on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of books in libraries. There's tons of NLP books, that you can get at half-price books for $6 or less. So whatever your budget, there's something for you. For those who have more monetary resources, I would say the biggest bang for their buck is going to be the personal one-on-one coaching with somebody who's highly skilled in what it is that they're interested in wanting to change or fix or excel.
You've mentioned a few times now that you were really hungry to learn this stuff, really hungry to figure it all out and to get to where you got to today. How important do you think it is to have that hunger? How much hunger does somebody have to have in order to really get this stuff?
I think it's huge. Whether you call it hunger or intensity or extreme curiosity, or even desperation. Desperation has a lot of intensity in it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that element, then nothing will really stick. Because your interest is not great enough for you to really pay attention, for you to own what's available to you. So like my ideal client, I say the words I use are highly motivated or highly inspired to make huge changes using law of attraction. Because honestly, Walt, I've worked with clients that they wanted it, but they didn't want it bad enough. And I ended up doing a lot of work where sometimes I'd be so emotionally, energetically drained, it would take me 3 days to recover from one session.
Wow.
And that's when I went, what the heck's going on? And I started to recognize it's because they didn't want it as bad as I did. I wanted the change for them so bad that I put everything I had into helping them get the change, but they didn't want it that bad. Which was honestly the reason why, even at an early age, I knew I was interested in psychology and understanding how humans behave the way they do. The reason I didn't get an education in, counseling or becoming a psychotherapist is because I wanted to be able to pick and choose who I worked with. I didn't, I think I've heard, I can't remember if it was something I heard Joel say or something you said or something that he wrote in our book, A Daily Dose of Happy. But, sometimes he would get clients that were court mandated to see a therapist, and they'd go to see them. And, somebody who's court mandated, they're not highly motivated. They're there because a judge said they had to go through anger management.
Exactly. Yeah, that was probably me who was telling you that, because that was Louise's experience as a psychotherapist. She worked a long time on court-ordered cases, and it got really frustrating. I mean, she was experiencing what you were describing about how she'd put all this energy in, and she was putting more into it than the client was. And the net result was that the client wouldn't get anywhere. The client wouldn't grow, and all she'd be is wiped out.
Well, left over from one of my websites. Once upon a time, I used to have a niche to work with marriage counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then, because you can never erase, even if you change your website, somehow there are things on the internet you can't ever find. There's things still out there. So every now and then I still get a call saying, do you do marriage counseling?
Mm.
And I'm reluctant to say yes or no because I'm not quite sure if this is going to be fun for me or not.
Yeah.
But, when I say yes, tell me what it is. Or tell me why you're calling, what's going on that causes you to think you need marriage counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody says, this is the stereotype, but I've had a number of these, so I'm going to say it. If I got a male to call me and he'll say, well, my wife wants to divorce me, and she said, unless we get marriage counseling, she's divorcing me now.
Mm.
And my next question is, okay, if she wasn't putting the threat of divorce over your head, would you be interested in counseling?
Nice
would
question.
you be interested?
Really good question.
And if the guy goes, well, I got the answer.
Yeah, right.
But if he says, oh, no, I was thinking of doing counseling even before she threatened. I just didn't know how to go about it. And this now is like the catalyst to cause me to say, yeah, we need to do something.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm willing to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I would get a wife calling up and saying, my husband and I are not getting along. We need counseling. And I'll say, okay. Well, marriage counseling takes two people. And is he interested in doing marriage counseling?
Mm.
And if she says, well, if he's not, I'm out of here. I'm like, wrong answer. I have one couple I'll tell you about. They live close by my house, so they came to see me in person. And the first session, I said, I want to see you two in person because I need to see what your dynamics are so I can assess the situation. And when we were done with the session, it was very obvious that they were both extremely hostile.
Mm-hmm.
We were not able to get what I would call any therapeutic change to occur because if I'd start working with her, she would actually shut down and not get vulnerable because she didn't want him to see her vulnerability.
Mm.
And if I was working with him, while he was starting to get vulnerable, she would jump in and go, see, this is what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, whoa. So my assessment at the end was, yeah, you got some real big time issues here, but I don't see how working with the two of you together is going to be beneficial. And you've already told me that your funds are limited. So if you want to get the biggest bang for your buck, I recommend you each see me separately. And then at a certain point, we may bring you back together. But right now, it needs to be each of you separately. They both told me they were committed to the process. They both told me they were committed to their marriage. So she set up her next appointment with me for one-on-one with me. And when it came to him, he said, I need to get my calendar at home. I'll get back with you. Okay. And he left my house separate from her because they came in two vehicles. And she said, he'll never get back to you. And I said, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So after a couple of days when he didn't respond, I emailed him and I said, here are my times that I'm available. And he never got back to me.
Mm-hmm. And
then apparently she discussed it with him and he communicated with me. We set up an appointment and he was a no-show.
Mm-hmm.
So that told me from the beginning, he was not as invested in this as her. And then she and I had two individual sessions and we booked a third one. And before the third one ever happened, she let me know that she's already divorced him and she's moved out of the state.
Wow.
So were they hungry for personal transformation? No. They were in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
They were in a lot of pain. And I will tell you, I think for them, they probably did the right thing. Because from the first session with them together, I went, this is not a viable, workable scenario to bring them together because neither one of them was willing to own their own stuff. It was all blaming each other. And sometimes, and I've heard Abraham say this, sometimes the path of least resistance is to cut bait and start over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I really saw that for them. But I didn't know at the time if that was appropriate for me to say. So I started with, well, if you're really wanting to build this relationship, we need to start with each of you separately, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I liked your question. Do you have to start with hunger? You got to start with some really intense desire to change.
I think so.
And you
Yeah.
got to be willing to do whatever it takes.
I mean, Joel has often, you mentioned Joel Elston, Joel has often waxed eloquent on the theme of the best things that happened in his life were those times when he was at his lowest, because he had nowhere else to fall. And it was almost like a relief, because now he could go up from there. I think what he was really saying is that's when he was hungriest.
Yes, I would agree. And interestingly, I believe the reason I use the word hungry is because food-related issues have been my stuff that I have
Yes,
dealt
right.
with. And so I have a lot of food, diet, body metaphors that seem to come out of me.
So even the metaphors are meaningful. I love it.
Even the metaphors are meaningful. You know, because I could have said you have to really want it. But you know what? That doesn't really ignite my feelings, but you got a hunger for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
But you know what? That might not be somebody else's thing, which is why I threw in other words, hoping that somebody else could relate at least to one of the phrases that I use.
Well, it's a really good point, because I think ultimately when I was asking the question about how hungry do you have to be, what I was really asking was, how do I, as a general person, not necessarily me, Walt Thiessen, but how do I, as a general person, know whether I'm hungry enough? How does one know that they've got enough desire? And I guess the answer is you keep going after it, and you don't stop. You're like a bulldog who doesn't let go.
It's kind of like somebody who says, let's say somebody's favorite band from way back when is Bon Jovi. And so let's say somebody says, hey, Bon Jovi's going to be in town. Do you want to see that concert? And they're like, yeah, I really like Bon Jovi. And doesn't do anything else about it.
Mm.
Well, he may like Bon Jovi, but it doesn't mean he likes him enough to even want to check into tickets.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't even mean that he has any Bon Jovi CDs. Doesn't mean he listened to Bon Jovi on Spotify. It's just like the words came out of the person's mouth,
Mm-hmm.
but there wasn't any real follow-up to go with it. And to me, when you know you really are interested in, there's follow-up. It's not just a one-time you had an idea or you had a desire, you know. Like I'll give you another example. Once upon a time when I was married, my husband had a friend who was in a really difficult place in his life. I would say spiritually bankrupt, financially bankrupt, emotionally bankrupt, and relationship bankrupt.
So not in a
And
good
without
place.
job.
No.
Yeah, really bad place. Oh, and by the way, he was talking about suicide. So yeah, it was a really bad place.
Really, really bad place.
So my husband went through a number of conversations with him to talk him into leaving the environment he was in, which was quite toxic for him,
Mm-hmm.
and having him come and stay with us.
Mm.
And he was saying, hey, listen, Wendy can help you. She's got the tools and the skills. She's an incredible life coach, you know. And the friend was like, okay. And he sounded like he was interested. Well, he came to our house. He ended up living with us, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 months. And we started where I was setting up times for us to have some session work where, you know, I could ascertain, where is he? Where do we need to start? And in the beginning, he at least would sit still through a session. But literally by the second session, I could tell he was squirmy. And by the third session, he blew it off.
Mm.
And he never did it again.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't hungry for change. He was suicidal. He was ready to just end it. But by living with us, he got enough comfort. He now had a roof over his head. You know, we fed him. We helped him get a job. You know, he started putting back some of the comforts in his life, but he never really was hungry to change. He just didn't like his life circumstances. So then scroll forward maybe another 5 years, and he had started to put his life together. He had gotten remarried, but now all of a sudden the relationship was falling apart, and the wife was taking her kids and herself to her parents' house in another state. And once again, he found himself out of work and he was losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, well, come and stay with us. So he did. And once again, my husband saying, Wendy can help you. And I remember sitting with him at a McDonald's going, truly, I have the skills that I can help you get through this if you're interested. And he's like, I really am. Things need to change. Well, the words were there, but the words were there right before he came to stay with us, almost like he was somehow baiting us. Like, you let me live with you and I'll change.
Yeah, like it's a trade.
Yeah, like I'll change, and I know that's at your house, but what he's not saying is, but I'll now have a roof over my head and I'll have food again, and and once again, he didn't follow through on anything.
Yeah.
And how it actually ended is, how he left was, we got in a fight over something where he said he'd be responsible for something. He wasn't. I called him out on that. He didn't like that. He started being argumentative with me. And I mentioned something about, that he never followed through, where he said he was going to let me help him. And he said, I don't believe in any of that mumbo jumbo. And I'm like, excuse me? Mm-hmm. And he goes, yeah, I don't even think what you do is real. And I said, you are here under this roof because you made a commitment to that. I was foolish enough to think that you actually meant it and that you trusted that what I had to provide for you was something that you wanted, but you obviously don't. And he made some other negative comments about, I don't want what you have to offer because I don't think what you have to offer has any value to it, in essence, what he said. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, you can leave. And he looked at me. I said, you can leave now. And he went and he gathered up his things and he left. And that was not fun for me to see that go down in that way.
No, nothing fun about
but
that.
I learned that was a negative experience that I learned so much from, about learning how to recognize, in other words, when somebody really wants what I have to offer, it looks way different than the experiences I had with him. Mm. He didn't want what I had to offer. My husband and I were practically throwing it at him, saying, please take what Wendy has to offer because she can make such a huge difference in your life. Mm-hmm. He didn't even believe in what I did.
Yeah.
But we were so snowed by our love for him and our desire to help him that we didn't recognize he wasn't hungry for what I had to offer.
It's really something.
Hopefully that answers that question.
Well, yeah, actually, it also raises about 25 others. In fact, it leads to an interesting topic, I think, for next time, because we're completely running out of time for this time. But I'm going to try to make a note and remember to bring this up next time, because I think it could make a really good topic. Before we leave, I just want to remind everybody, and I'm going to have to do the really brief version. If you aren't yet a subscriber, subscribe. The instructions are on the homepage at loatoday.net. And if you are a subscriber and you're loving it, please put it on social media so that everyone else can find out about it as well. And that is paying off. We're please begging you, keep doing it, because more and more people are finding about the Daily Dose of Happy. And that's our mission, to get it into as many hands as we possibly can. So please help us do it. And Wendy, really quickly, how do they reach you in case they want that private coaching situation?
You can find me at my website, which is wendydillard.com.
I can always count on you for the quick response on that one. But it's been great. I look forward to continuing the discussion on Thursday.
All right, this was a fun discussion.
Yeah, it's been fun. And we hope that you'll join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye for now.